Welcome to BioSignals, the podcast powered by BioCrossroads, where we decode the pulse of Indiana's life sciences sector. Each episode, we bring you the innovators, breakthroughs, and bold ideas shaping the future of health and science. Today's episode marks the launch of something big. It's the beginning of a new regional identity, one designed to tell the story of how human, animal, and plant biosciences converge right here in the heart of America. It's called the BioHeartland. Across Indiana and the greater central Indiana region, a powerful ecosystem is already taking shape, where breakthrough therapies are invented, advanced technologies are manufactured at scale, and products move efficiently across the globe. From life sciences and agbiosciences to advanced manufacturing, logistics, and research, this region is uniquely positioned to lead the future of bioscience innovation. In this episode of BioSignals, we'll unpack how the BioHeartland initiative came together, why this moment matters, and what it means for companies, communities, entrepreneurs, and the talent across the region. Joining us for the conversation will be Melina Kennedy, CEO of the CEOs of Indiana Corporate Partnership, along with Vince Wong, CEO and President of BioCrossroads, Christy Wright, CEO and President of Agronovis, and Mayor of Fishers, Indiana, Scott Fadness. Together, they'll discuss the research, collaboration, and momentum behind the BioHeartland launch and why telling a unified biosciences story has never been more important. This is BioSignals, and this is the beginning of the BioHeartland.
Well, great. I want to welcome our audience listeners here today to a really exciting podcast with some special guests. Let me first briefly introduce myself. I'm Melina Kennedy. I lead CEOs of Indiana Corporate Partnership, CICP, and just thrilled to be here today with a few other special guests. I'll briefly introduce them, and then they'll be sharing their views and thoughts with their incredible expertise. We have Mayor Scott Fadness, who's the mayor of the city of Fishers. We have Vince Wong, who's the CEO of the BioCrossroads Initiative, and Christy Wright, who's the CEO of Agronovis. And today we're going to be talking about something that I think has been on the minds of many Hoosiers for a long time that relates to our incredible asset strength in the central Indiana region around biosciences. And when I say biosciences, it's broadly including life sciences, including agbiosciences. And that's part of what you'll hear more about today from our guests about what a strong presence we have in that space. And the long time kind of understanding that we have a ton of assets here, but how do we talk about them? How does the world know what's actually happening here? And that's what's really going to be the meat of our discussion today. So very quick background, let me just share that in the last 6 to 8 months, CICP brought together a number of organizations to learn from an organization we engaged called the Global Institute of Innovation Districts, who is an organization internationally known that really looks at the ecosystems that have strong innovation districts like Central Indiana. And how can those innovation districts work less in silo, but more together to really supercharge economies? And so, again, that's a topic you'll hear more about. But we brought together a number of partners in industry and higher education with CICP, Agronovis, and BioCrossroads. And really importantly, and he'll talk more about this as well, Mayor Fadness and the CERTA organization, which is a very unique organization that brings together the mayors in central Indiana around really important topics, including economic development. And so this partnership with CICP and CERTA and these other organizations is really what brought what we're going to talk about here today to the forefront. So with that, let me just start with Mayor Fadness. If you can just share a little bit from your perspective, tell us a little bit more about CERTA. Sure. And the importance of life sciences in the central Indiana region.
Thanks for having me, Melina. CERTA is kind of the manifestation of the concept we're better together than we are apart. And it's really focused on the public sector. So as CICP has worked hard to align the interests of the private sector, we have tried to do the same around government, local government in particular. Today we have 32 cities across central Indiana, ranging from Anderson, Indiana to Franklin, Greencastle to Greenwood, and everything in between. We have small rural communities all the way up to our largest metropolitan area, our state capital, Indianapolis. And frankly, we get together to do two things. We try to seize opportunities and we try to tackle challenges. And to your point about life sciences and why is it so important, when you ask somebody who they are, typically one of the most defining elements of that identity is, well, what do you do? And I think for a very long time in central Indiana, we have been a little bit lost in our ability to answer that question definitively as a region, what do we do? And I think the work that we're talking about here and what we're about to roll out should answer that question. Now, it's not the whole identity of who we are as central Indiana, but it's a very, very important component. And I think it'll be a defining component as we move forward.
One of the things that we've learned through this process with GIID is that this bioscience infrastructure here is really broad, and we have a particular win and differentiator in that we are really strong in all of animal, human, and agricultural life sciences, which is why we really talk more in the bioscience terminology. And so with that, two experts passionate about each of these fields, I'm going to ask Christy to start, who leads Agronovus, to talk a little bit more about the ag bioscience infrastructure and assets that we have here in central Indiana.
Sure. Well, thanks, Melina. I'm happy to be here today, and this is such an exciting opportunity for central Indiana and even for the broader state. So you mentioned ag bioscience, and every time I have the opportunity, I like to tell people what we mean by that. So when we say ag bioscience, we're really talking about 5 platform economies. That includes agricultural production, value-added food and nutrition, crop science and crop health, animal health, and ag tech and ag systems. And Indiana has a unique preponderance of leadership in all of those spaces. And when you take those platform economies together, our sector contributes about $82 billion to the Indiana economy. That's updated numbers. In fact, we just got that number, and compared to last year, we've seen a lot of growth, not only in the economic impact, but also in the Hoosier workforce. So now we're up to about 152,000 Hoosiers who work in our sector when you include farm proprietors. And the momentum that we're seeing in our space, in the ag bioscience space, is just so exciting. When you think about, Indiana was named as a USDA hub. We know SNAP is coming here. What an amazing opportunity for Indiana and for USDA to tap into the excellent resources we have here with the largest medical school in the nation, with one of the largest ag schools, one of the best ag schools in the nation. We just had Corteva decide to have its future here again. And that's just 2 examples of a plethora, of things that are happening here, as well as a startup ecosystem that's really thriving and continuing to tap into everything we have to offer here from a talent standpoint as well. So that's, I would say, just a quick snapshot of what we're seeing in our sector, and also a little bit about why we're so excited about this initiative.
Vince, moving to you and the broader life sciences, human health, for example, can you talk a little bit about the assets here in Indiana, central Indiana?
Absolutely. Great to be able to join you all. And I think it might be the first joint episode of Ag Bioscience and Biosignal. So it's kind of a cool opportunity to do a joint production on this. So thanks, Christy, for your partnership. Melina, with regards to life sciences, I think, Christy just talked about plant and animal science. The third leg of the stool would be human health. And so you can think about pretty much anything that's regulated by the FDA. So that goes anything from diagnostics to devices to medicine. And Indiana has remarkable assets across those 3 domains. We've got the North American headquarters of the world-leading diagnostics company in the world, Roche Diagnostics, up near Mayor Fadness's neck of the woods, where I spent 17 years. And then in devices, we have the largest privately held medical device company at the Cook Group, and then also really a strong ecosystem of implantable devices and also minimally invasive devices as well. And then on the medicine side, Lilly is certainly a big anchor of our ecosystem, the world's highest value medicine company, and then really a very rich ecosystem of suppliers for Lilly. But also, anyone who lands in Indianapolis and drives towards the city, you'll see Novartis on the side of the highway, and where they're making groundbreaking therapies for prostate cancer and radiopharmaceuticals. And so we are the radiopharmaceutical capital of the world. We've got a strong cluster of companies in that space as well. So a really robust and diverse base of assets that are really also undergirded by our R1 university. So whether it be the School of Medicine, which Christy alluded to earlier, which is the largest school of medicine in the country and a top 15 recipient of NIH funding amongst public schools of medicine, and then Purdue and IU are just prolific generators of IP. We're like top quartile in IP generation, top quartile in peer review publication generation. So really innovation engine as well as manufacturing.
That's terrific. It's incredible, and from both of your comments, it's clear that the breadth of the strength is very, very robust. I think a higher level point to make too, when you look at this confluence of agricultural, human, and animal life sciences, we have the world giants. The headquarters of Corteva, Lilly, Elanco, right here within miles of each other, which is pretty amazing. We have some incredible wind at our sails as well, and I'll turn this one to Mayor Fadness. Recently, the state announced a very significant investment in the life sciences, and I think that really puts our state on a map even more. If you'd like to share a little bit more about that.
Well, we're excited that the Secretary of Commerce and Governor Braun committed $1 billion over the next 10 years to focus on the acceleration of these companies, whether it's recruiting additional life science companies to the region and the state, or building on the ones that are already here and helping them grow. And so that comes in the form of, property tax replacement, tax credits, redevelopment tax credits, as well as edge credits. And those are really just incentives and tools that we have at the state level to focus in on these industries. And I think that's really more it than anything, is it sends a clear message to the rest of the world, frankly, that Central Indiana and really all of Indiana is very serious about this industry. It is a priority for this administration as well as our local governments, and we're gonna do what we can to solve problems and get as many of these folks here as we possibly can.
Really exciting, and that is an announcement that will have years of positive impact for us. So I want to talk a little bit about just some of the strengths that we found through this process when CACP engaged GIID. We learned some things that the state is very well known, and we wear this proudly, for being the most advanced manufacturing intensive state in the country. So we are good at making things. Vince, I'll ask you, what were some of the surprises and what did we learn that you think helps tell our story?
Yeah, I think it's what's really interesting is and distinct about our ecosystem compared to other communities that are conventionally thought of as hubs of life science innovation, whether it be Boston or San Diego and SF, San Francisco, which are undoubtedly engines of innovation. We here in Indiana not only can invent things, and I alluded to that earlier in terms of our patent generation and our peer review publications. And last year we had over 1,000 patents and then about 800 FDA approvals coming out of our industry. So it really speaks to our innovation engine, but also, again, the fact that we also manufacture and move product as well. So you've got this full value chain that Boston, San Diego, and the Bay Area don't have. And so having this integrated value chain in close proximity allows companies to move faster. And time is money when it comes to life science products that are often governed by patents, and there's like melting ice cubes. And so every day that you're not on market is a day you lose patent exclusivity. So really being able to get from bench side to patients in as fast of a time frame as possible is a huge value for companies, and they can really leverage this proximity of that cross-functional set of assets here in Indiana like nowhere else.
You think the idea that we're 3 times the national average in patent activity and the robust peer-reviewed research that we see here too. It's just that story of us not only making things, but we invent it here too, and we move it. Mayor, do you want to talk a little bit about a world-class airport and the proximity to it?
Yeah, absolutely. We had this fascinating conversation with some of the mayors and town leaders around Central Indiana, because as we started to say, well, life science really is our future and this is what our identity will be, some of the communities started struggling with, well, how do I fit into that story? I don't have the discovery component, or maybe I don't have the make component of it. But some of those communities are world leaders in logistics and distribution. And when we think about what wages mean, I mean, all of this effort and activity, at least from a public sector standpoint, is about making sure that Hoosiers have meaningful careers that support the lifestyles that we all aspire to have. And so when you look at in the distribution sector with a world-class airport and FedEx and just the logistics hub that really is Hendricks County, you have people that are making probably 30 or 40% more in terms of wages by being in a distribution industry associated with life sciences than you would in, say, like e-commerce. And so when you start to understand that component, you realize that by, again, nurturing this industry, it has tentacles out into a variety of different spaces and places that people probably wouldn't normally think of.
I think when you think about, based on all the comments you've made, this incredible differentiator we have with the animal, human, agricultural, bioscience leadership, with the fact that we not only invent things here and make things here, we move things here. There's so much more to talk about as well. I think, Vince, you've shared many times, we are number one in terms of life sciences exports for the whole country. Recently surpassed California. A lot of people don't know that. It's incredible. There's another thing that differentiates us from the feedback that we've had that sometimes people think is soft. And I'm going to be here to say I don't think it is, but I want to ask Christy to talk a little bit about it, in part because I've found you to be one of the most collaborative partners I've had the opportunity to work with. But collaboration, you see the mayors coming together. I've been in economic development for 25 plus years. I've never seen something like that and really work together, not elbows out, but like, how do we work together? And Christy, I think you've really led that way at AgriNovus. Tell us a little bit more about why you think that's important and where you think that's showing up in our ecosystem.
I think it's a key differentiator for Indiana. We right now have the amazing great fortune to have the private sector, the public sector, and the philanthropic sector all pulling in the same direction. And that's reflected in the type of investment that's happening here with the state government. Like you mentioned before, it's happening with massive investments from the Lilly Endowment, from our universities, strategic projects that are being based here that will change how onshoring manufacturing happens, for example. So all of these things I think would not happen if we were not able to bring together the different players across these sectors. And that's a very unique thing. It may be tied to our Hoosier roots, hard to say. We kind of like to think that might be part of it. But regardless, it's good for business, it's good for community, and it's good for society.
Great. Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Mayor Fadness is not going to toot his own horn, but I mean, just what Mayor Fadness and his team have built in Fishers, which shows that public-private partnership where, this otherwise, real time back 10 years ago, it was a very sleepy suburb with very little, industrial base. But because of like the public-private partnership and the just attitude of just get stuff done, and the practicality, a mindset that we have here in spades, and you drive up to Fishers now and you can see, Stevanato and Incog and Telix and Jennison and this really cool cluster of life science companies that have come there not by accident, but because of intention and ability to act quickly and collaborate, is like exhibit A of what we're talking about here. So,
I love
that's a great
that.
example.
I love that word intention, because I think that's the era that we're about to enter into. I think a lot of the things that we've talked about so far, I would like to think maybe happened to us, but not because of us. But that's a great foundation to really build upon, and the intentional work that we can do together, CICP and CERTA and others. I feel like we're going to look back 10 years from today and go, well, we know that we actually played a role in those things occurring. Like, there's an intentionality that I think we're about to enter into that I don't know that Central Indiana has had, at least not to this scale, as long as I can remember.
I think that's right. And especially with this opportunity we're seizing on, the intentionality, that's a great word, Mayor, of really telling our story collectively. I would argue every time we tell just one kind of piece of the ecosystem alone, we're losing. When we have such a compelling broad story, when it all comes together on this invent, make, move, on this biosciences, human and animal health leadership, and all these other wind at our sails with the data and the statistics. So I want to turn the conversation a little bit to the intention of actually talking about this community, this base of assets in a much more intentional way so we can tell the world our story. So let's talk a little bit about how we're going to do that. And what's interesting, some of you listening may not know, is that both Christy and Vince have strong marketing backgrounds in addition to their deep industry insights. So that's super helpful here. I'll start with Vince. If you can maybe just talk a little bit about the why. Why does it matter how we tell our story? And what are your thoughts on what other communities are doing that maybe we're not doing yet today?
Yeah, I think the collective vision of us around the table is we want people to have a clear mental model in their mind when they think of our region, and that we have a identity that's very distinct and authentic of what we are and what we have and we're blessed with. And so, when people say the research triangle, or they say Kendall Square, or they say Silicon Valley, that automatically like brings up mental models or concepts in people's minds, both explicitly and implicitly. And we want to create really our identity that conjures up what is authentic for us, and conveys really that message for people that we want to attract, right? Investors, talent, and companies to come and stay, and that they know that we're open for business in the biosciences.
So through this process, and we've talked a little bit about it and the findings that we have, we're really excited about the launching of BioHeartland. That can really be the way we tell our story quickly, and people can start to associate all of this in a place in central Indiana where biosciences solutions are invented, made, and moved. I love it. We've gotten lots of good feedback, and this came from, just to kind of touch on the process, a significant amount of input from stakeholders, focus groups, professional third-party advice, the mayor's CERTA group, et cetera. Christy, talk a little bit about that process, and then in that, share with us a little bit more of your kind of feedback on why BioHeartland really resonates, why that feels good here.
Well, I thought the process was great, but also fascinating. It was really interesting to see leaders from the ag bioscience sector and the life sciences sector really come together and share some dialogue and perspectives on the ecosystem, what the ecosystem needs, and what opportunities we have in our region. So I thought people, had several opportunities to really put their thumbprint on this, which is nice too. This is something that's the product of the sectors here. I am really excited about it because I think it serves as an excellent bridge between plant, animal, and human health. And when we think about, again, kind of tying back to our earlier conversation about what makes this different, this region different, this is it, along with the invent, make, move. What we get to do at Agronovis is to make sure that we're making the ag bioscience economy grow. And the way we do that is to help people and companies succeed. And this is going to help us understand what we need to do to support the ecosystem. It's going to help us compete with other places around the world, the areas that Vince mentioned and others. And so I see this as a feather in our cap, and also a very useful competitive tool as we look to support our ecosystem actors and the communities in Indiana.
Great.
What I love about BioHeartland too, I think it brings together kind of two different concepts that are not often juxtaposed, right? So you got bio on the other hand, which kind of speaks for itself in terms of all the innovation and assets we've been talking about the last few minutes. But then you bring that together with like Heartland, which really speaks to, I think, the authentic values and of hard work and practicality and just getting stuff done and collaboration that I think really is distinctive for us and we can really own. So if you bring these two together, these bio and Heartland, I think it works and it's authentic, and I think it will resonate. And I think it also maybe cause people to ask questions like, tell me more.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we all hope that when we're traveling on an airplane in a couple of years and people ask, where are you from or where do you work? And we can all say, I work in the BioHeartland.
Mm-hmm.
And we can say it with pride, and people will recognize, or it will spark a conversation
Mm-hmm.
and questions. So I think that's where we want to go with this.
Really helps us to be able to tell that collective story too, because in the BioHeartland is where 3 times the national average of patent work and patent activity happens. If you talk about one company or one asset within the BioHeartland, you won't be able to have that statistic or the number one life science exporter. So, Mayor, one of the things that was interesting in the GIID findings was just how, well, let me just back up to say that they spatially mapped where this activity is happening, where the discovery is happening, where the invention's happening, where the enterprise. And when you look at it visually, it is purely throughout this central Indiana. It's not, there are some clusters, but it affects everyone. And I'd love to know kind of your thoughts on what this means, having a
Yeah.
brand, and what it means for central Indiana broadly.
Well, I think Vince put it well. I mean, what I like about BioHeartland is it speaks to both what we do, but it also speaks to who we are. There's a great through line here about the industry that we're pursuing, but it also the kind of the values that we represent, which I think is great. And in all of the economic models, all the locations, communities, regions that everyone's aspiring to become their peers, it's a convergence of a place and an industry. And we have that here with this. And what is so inspiring about just calling our shot, I'll give you an anecdotal story. This morning I was late to this meeting because I was with CERTA and we had a meeting and I was mentioning that we're announcing this and everyone knows that life science is going to be our focus. Afterwards, I was sitting with 2 city leaders from 2 different communities and from the southern side of our region, smaller communities. And they were so proud to tell me that they have 2 life science companies that they're attracting and trying to grow because they want to be a part of this story. I think there's another component of this that once you call your shot, most people want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And so you're going to start to see people starting to align in ways that you didn't have to force or mandate, but rather aspiration just kind of creates this inspiration to be a part of that. And I think that's what this is.
That's awesome. So listeners may be thinking, well, how can I help? How do I be part of this? And how do we tell the story? Christy, you want to talk a little bit about that? And then Vince, maybe talk about bio.
Listeners can look forward to an announcement as well as additional information coming out about BioHeartland, and can look forward also to the announcement at Bio, which I'll let you talk about, Vince.
Yeah, sure. We have an opportunity. We've gathered a coalition of the willing to co-invest and create an Indiana presence at Bio International Conference in San Diego in the 3rd week of June. That's going to serve as an amazing platform on a national and even a global basis for us to really have a coming out party of BioHeartland and really speak to really the world. Every state that has even a shadow of a life science industry is there, and we're going to be able to really proudly unveil this new identity. And so we're excited to do that with all the partners that are going to be there with us. So excited to have both a local launch here, but also a national one as well in San Diego.
And part of that rollout will include a website so that we'll have access to the data, the statistics, the things that we can make sure everybody's aware of, because it's funny. Even those who I work with who are very embedded in our ecosystem have said, I didn't realize we were number 1 life sciences exporter. There's a lot of facts that people maybe don't know, and bringing it together, I hope, will make it very easy for them. Mayor, how about you? What are your thoughts about engagement?
Well, I think our mission is, I think it's wonderful, the brand you guys came up with. I think my mission is taking actions for the next 12 to 24 months that reaffirm that aspiration. So we want to solve problems. We want to land companies. We want to build infrastructure. We want to work on our workforce. And every time we land a company, every time we make a step forward, reaffirming and connecting it back to the brand is what's really, really important to us. So I'm excited that Vince and the team they're going to be out on the global stage talking about this. And back home, we're going to be rolling up our sleeves and just making sure we're executing on all of this so that we have more good news to share.
So BioHeartland, where biosciences solutions are invented, made, and moved. This is incredibly exciting. I'll just ask a closing question to each of you. If there's anything else you want to share that you feel like audience listeners should know about the industry or anything more broadly. Christy, if I can start with you.
I think engage and make sure that you visit bioheartland.com. Make sure that you know the talking points and help us tell our story, because this is a very exciting next chapter for Indiana.
Yeah, similarly, I think everyone that listens to this podcast can serve as an ambassador for the brand, and in their own way amplify the message so that we can break through the noise. And this will not be kind of a one and done, flash in the pan. We're going to do a systematic drumbeat over the course of 12, 18 months, because that's what it takes for a brand to really stick. Research Triangle Park didn't happen overnight. That was a piece, an outcome of really decades of intention and continued sustained investment. And so that's our game plan, is really have that sustained drumbeat that gives us the opportunity to kind of break through the noise.
Terrific.
I think, for me, it's to not forget about the why behind all of this is not to serve industry necessarily or for bragging rights, but it honestly is to make sure that current generations and future generations of Hoosiers have opportunities here to call this place home and to make a living that satisfies the kind of the concept of the American dream, which seems to be more elusive today than ever before. And so this work it has a double bottom line to it. I mean, there is a real mission behind this for Central Indiana. It is our future, and that why should not be forgotten anytime soon.
Well, that's a very great and inspirational note to end on. It is such a pleasure to work with this group and beyond. Thank you for joining today's show. And again, BioHeartland, where bioscience solutions are invented, made, and moved. That's who we are, and that's how we're going to win.
For more information about BioCrossroads, our events, programs, and how you can get involved, please visit biocrossroads.com.